Good morning, everybody. Apologies for starting so late. How are y'all? How was the weekend?
Good.
Good? All right, so my headphones, once again, not coming on. Why? I do not know. Wait a sec. Right, so they're on. There we go. All right, somebody say something so I can hear.
Good
Somebody
morning.
say. All right, good. They came on. Awesome. Thank you, Nick. Um, okay. So happy Tuesday, not Monday. So how was the weekend? Good? Yeah.
Uh,
Okay. Um, so I did a lot of work this weekend. So it was a nice weekend for me. So today we're going to sort of the first day that we're going to start really diving into JavaScript and thinking about how we might begin to use some of these things for the next project. And I'm really thinking of the next project as a continuation of the first project. I know I haven't put up the requirements for project 2 yet, but it's essentially you're working on the same project, unless you really, really want to change it. That's something we can talk to each other individually about. Working on the same project, we're just adding features to it, interactive features. And so over it's I know I haven't really put up the thing for you to make a proposal for the second project yet, because I don't think you know quite enough what JavaScript can do in order to start thinking about what you might propose, right, as far as like interactivity will go. So we'll talk a little bit more about the project on on Thursday. um, so some things you might think about when you're beginning to think about what you might add to your first project. So let's say you had a kind of game. Let's say you had a game and where you're doing things on a page, maybe just clicking on things. You can say collect points, right? So if you like click on something, you can collect points. Now, the problem with the problem with anything, with web pages, is once you leave a page, you open up a brand new page with a brand new set of code, right? So the difficulty is transferring something from one page into another page, because it's like opening up a whole new thing, right? So what you now there are some programming languages that we can do behind the scenes, right? Like if your website was up on the internet, there are stuff we can save on the computers, right, which we call servers on the internet, that will allow you to transfer information from one file to another. But with sort of what we call front end development, which is what we're doing, front end is basically the stuff that people see, the website itself, the stuff that happens right in the files that we make. That's what we're working on. Using front end development, meaning like client side stuff, the stuff that the clients or their users are going to see. Doing front end development is really not that easy to transfer information from one page to another. It's not that hard. It's just it takes some real thinking about. Hold on a second. Let me let somebody else in. So one of the things you can do is we can use JavaScript and something called Ajax to allow us to bring one piece of information from one page to the next page to the next page. For example, like let's say you click on stuff and you either collect points or collect items, like let's say you're doing some kind of adventure game, maybe, or that you collect items and then you want to be able to go from one page to the next page with those items or with the same amount of points. So when you click on the next page, you go to the next page, you don't want to have lost everything that you've already collected, right? Everything that you've already gained. So that's one thing we can think about, is how do you transfer information from one page to the next page? Another example of the same thing would be, let's say you enter into your website and you ask the user their name, right? And they can type their name into a little box. We've already seen how we can take information from a box and feed it back into the page, right? But what if you want to be able to use that user's name, like they type in their name, Carter, and then it says, hi, Carter, and then you go to the next page and you want to be able to continue using that user's name, right? Well, then in order to do that, we have to figure out a way to transfer the information from one page to the next page. Or let's say the game or the website asks you, well, what is your character's name? Like, you can enter information about your character. What's your character's name? What is your, like, what are they wearing, or how old are they, or any kind of information like that you want to be able to use throughout the site from one page to the next page to the next page. We have to figure out a way to save the information in one page, and so that we can transfer it to the next page. So that's something, all of those things are kind of examples of the same thing, but they serve different functions. Basically, it's collecting data of any kind, whether it be points or names of items or names of characters or information about characters, and collecting those points or collecting that data and transferring it from one page to another page. So that's a big thing that we're going to be learning. I think because it's key, right? You want to be able to, in so many different types of experiences online, you want to be able to save information from one page to the next page and the next page and the next page after that, and not have it be lost every time you open up a new file. And so today I'm going to be starting to show you some vehicles where we can begin to collect information. Okay. We've already seen one of them, and one of them is variables, right? A variable is a container for data. So if you create a variable, you can put information in that, but you can't easily just use a variable in one page and then have whatever that information is in that page go to the next page too, right? It doesn't happen that easily. So we have to learn other things in order to be able to transfer the data of one variable to the next, from one page to the next. So we're going to learn something else today called an array. An array is kind of like a variable, but instead of just being able to store one piece of data, we can store multiple pieces of data, right? So for example, let's say you wanted to collect all the names of all the people in this class, first names, last names, maybe their ID, maybe their telephone number, all that stuff. If you wanted to be able to collect all that information and organize it, then you need arrays for that as well. What we would call parallel arrays, where we have one array whose data, like maybe an array of first names, an array of last names, an array of ID numbers, an array of where you have all this data that's collected about a group. So those are two important things we're going to learn about today, and then also how to access that information. Okay, so don't worry about if you don't know exactly how on earth you're possibly going to use JavaScript to any interesting effect yet. We'll start really thinking about that on Thursday, I think. Also, later today, I know I haven't posted my responses to your projects yet. I'm still like finishing those, so that will be up later today. So the responses to your projects will be up later today. Okay, because included in the second project is how to improve upon your first project, right? So I'll make some suggestions if your first project, and in addition to adding JavaScript aspects of JavaScript into your projects, there are ways, like I'm doing critiques on, like, say, design and functionality and all of that stuff on your websites of how to make the overall experience a little bit better, more interesting conceptually and aesthetically. Okay, so let me make sure everything is set up. Does anybody have any questions while I'm doing this? No? Okay, y'all are so quiet. Wow. I talk so much and y'all talk so little. Okay, so go ahead and set everything up like we normally do with a main folder, the 4 subfolders, and your index. That's what I've done. And I'm going to start sharing my screen. Okay. Save this. Okay. So nothing new yet. So the first thing I want to do is introduce you to this new concept of an array. And then another one of what we call a looping structures. So let's go ahead and create a new JavaScript file. This is going to be in my JavaScript folder, so I'm going to save it. I'm going to call it script1, and it's going to go into my JavaScript folder here. One second. I have a number of people who are. Okay. All right. So, like I said, an array is very much like a variable, right? Is actually, I should name is, and that it is a named container for data. Okay. So let's take a look at this. So we start out the same way when we're creating an array. We start out with the same keyword, var. So it's very much like an array, a variable, right? So, and then we give it a name as well. How about I call this, I don't know, cities, right? That could be the name of my array. Makes sense because I'm going to put names of cities in this array. Now, unlike a variable, we don't just give it a value like this, right? And with a variable, we would just do this, right? We have one piece of data, in this case, a string, that is the value for the variable. But the moment that I try to put another piece of data in that, right? If I were to do, say, cities again equals Los Angeles, right? If I were to do that now, New York is gone. And now Los Angeles has taken its place. So you can only put one piece of data in a variable at any given time. I've said that New York was the value of cities, but then the next line I said that Los Angeles was the value of cities. And because we can only have one value in a variable at a time, one piece of data, the first value is kicked out and replaced by the new value. An array is not like this. So I'm going to start again. And if we want to store multiple piece values in a single element, we have to first tell the browser that this is not a variable, but that it is an array. And we can do that in multiple ways. And I'll show you more than one way to do this. We do that the sort of long way of doing it, right? There's a more verbose way, which requires more language, but it's much more explicit. Sometimes the more explicit things are the easiest things to remember. So I'm going to show you the long way because it's easier to remember. It tells us exactly what's happening. But then there are shorter ways where you can type less that do exactly the same thing. So we put new array. So this is very explicit. It tells us, no, this is not a variable, but we're modifying the variable and turning it into an array. An array is a kind of object that has different properties from a variable. And one of those properties is its ability to store multiple elements of data. There are multiple objects in JavaScript that are modified variables. Whenever you're modifying a variable and turning it into a new kind of object, you put new there. So there are other objects like color objects. We would put new color. There's so many different kinds of objects. And every time you create a new one of those objects, you put new in front of it. This is just a common syntax for creating what we call objects. More on that in a future class. Okay, so new array. We've turned cities into an array. Now we're going to start putting data inside of it, right? However, since we're going to be putting multiple elements of data in there, we have to figure out a way to access each piece of data. So if I have 100 pieces of data in this new object called cities, how do I get to the first one or the last one or the 33rd one or the 68th one, right? How do I know which one is the piece of data, or how do I sort through all that data? It's not like in a big bin that you can just go through it, right? Nor would you want to. What if you had 1,000 pieces of data in your array? You wouldn't want to sort through 1,000 pieces of data because you go, no, not this one, not this one, not this one, not that one, right? So there's a way of organizing the information so you can easily access the data that's in the array. And we do that by numbering the pieces of data. So in an array, if you're going to have multiple elements of data, we organize them by numerically. So the first piece of data that we're inserting in our array has the number 0. Oops. And we do it like this. It's what we call an index number. Okay. All right, so in computers like starting to count at 0. So the first element of data in an array is always indicated by the index 0. And then we assign the 0 index of the cities array with a value, like say New York. Then we have a second one, which would be 1, Los Angeles. Right? And then what about the third one will be, let's say, Chicago. Oops. I don't know. 5 is enough, right? All right. So now I have 5 elements of data in my array called cities. I'm going to indent this. You don't have to indent it, but I always like to indent it so that I can see that they belong together. For me, it's clearer to do that. You don't have to do that. In this program, it's nice because you can just highlight several lines of code and hit the tab key, and they all get indented. Let me do that once again. You can highlight a series of lines of code like this, and then hit tab, and they all get indented, which is pretty nice for like organization purposes. Visually organizing, right? All right, so great. Now this array has multiple elements of data, and at 5 to be exact. How about we test that out? I'm going to send it to the console. Like so. Now, we haven't attached the script yet to the index, right? We have script01.js, but we haven't created the link to the index. So why don't we go ahead and do that? I'm going to go to my index over here and put the script tag. Oops. Okay. So now I've added the link in my index to the script. So hopefully the line where we're sending it to the console will mean that it'll show up in the page in the console. So let's open up our console too. Reload the page. Good. And we see the array. This is what it looks like in Firefox. We can see the array is organized in square brackets at the top, but if we click on this little arrowhead here, it opens it up and we see also the index numbers. And then at the bottom, it says length 5. We'll talk about what that means too. Let's see what it looks like in Chrome. What it looks like. All right, so very similar to it. It doesn't have them listed horizontally, but it does list them vertically when you open it up like so, with that little arrowhead right there. All right, does everybody see that?
Yeah.
So what do we think that means at the bottom where it says length 5? What do we think that means? Take a guess. If you don't know, the worst thing that could happen is I could say, nope, that's not it. What do we think that means? Length 5.
It's probably just how many things are in the array.
That's exactly right. All right. So if we
Yeah.
count, there's 5 elements. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So one of the properties of an array is its length. If we were to ask the browser what the length of the array is, it would tell us 5. That's actually useful to know because we often don't know how long an array is. Right? Imagine you're inputting random pieces of data into an array, and there could be thousands of elements in the array, and you just don't know, right, what they are. So then if you need to know how many elements are in the array, all you have to do is ask the browser what its length is. All right, let's do that just so I can show you the difference. So I'm going to comment this console log out here and do another one. What if I put console.log cities.length? That means the length of the cities array. I'll save that and reload. It says 5, the number 5, which is exactly what we know it is. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. So a little bit of information about this way of typing things where we have something, then a dot, then something else, right? We've seen this a lot already. Let me show you something. I'm going to comment this out, by the way. Some examples. Well, this is called, oops. Dot syntax. Put that in uppercase, dot syntax. So dot syntax, well, the word syntax means the order of terms, right? And so if you're speaking any language, every language has its own syntax. And that just means what is the organization of the terms of a particular language. So in English, the typical syntax in English, when you're speaking of subjects and verbs, right? The subject comes first, then the verb comes second, right? So I would say the cat meows, right? Or the cat scratched, right? Or the cat ran, right? The subject, the thing, the object, the noun, the subject of the sentence, the cat, is doing something. That's the verb. In English, the subject comes first and the verb comes second, right? And a lot of languages are that way, but not all languages, right? And so that's the particular syntax of English. And that's just a simple example. So in when we're talking about any language, we're talking about syntax, we're talking about the order of the terms. And we've seen it, like when we've gotten errors in the console log, it says syntax error. That just means you've typed something out of order, right? You've basically typed put a period in the wrong place, right? Syntactical error. So that's what the word syntax means. It's the order of terms. When we're talking about dot syntax, it means that the terms that are separated by dots, right, is a way of doing things. In dot syntax, the first element is the object, right? Is a thing. The second element is a property of that object. Property. Or well, let's do something better. Well, I'll call it property. Or another way of saying that would be a thing and a characteristic, right? So characteristic belongs to the thing. The property belongs to the object. So if I can give you some examples, we can say, for example, maybe put little dashes there. So for example, let's say we have a house, right? And one of this is a 2-story house. So one of the properties of that house is its first floor, right? The first floor is a property of the house. So if we wanted like access the first floor, we first have to go through the house. We put a dot and then first floor. Now, the property is sometimes an object itself. And so it has properties or characteristics as well. So for example, something on the first floor could be, say, kitchen, right? So the kitchen belongs to the first floor, which belongs to the house. And the kitchen has properties too, right? So the kitchen, for example, could have a stove, right? So the stove is a property of the kitchen, which is a property of the first floor, which is a property of the house, right? I'm just giving you a common language example. This is what we call dot syntax. Now, these are things and properties, or object and properties, right? We also have kind of like verb-like elements, actions. So a house can have multiple properties. It can have a roof, it can have a first floor, it can have a second floor, it can have windows, it can have doors, right? All of those things can be properties of a house. But objects can also do things, right? A stove is an object, is a thing in our kitchens, but it does things. What does a stove do? It cooks, right? So we can put not just properties that belong to objects, not just characteristics of objects, but we can put also things that those objects can do, behaviors. What can a stove do? It can cook. But the way we type it, since it's an action, right? Since it's an activity that the stove performs, right? This is something that the stove does. It's not something that the kitchen does. It's something that the stove does. We put cook, and then the 2 parentheses means it's not a property, right? It's not a characteristic of the object, but it's something that the object can perform or can do. And some example that we've done in JavaScript of this, right, is, well, can you think of an example in JavaScript where you've seen something like this? We've done at least 2 that I can think of, that this dot syntax, where we have an object and a dot and an action. What is an example you can think of? Actually, I can think of 3.
Document.getElement by ID.
Exactly. Document, dot get element by ID, right? This is our object, and this is something that the object can do. It's an action of the object. What else? Any other?
Console.log.
Console.log. We just typed it up above, right? Console.log, right? There's another one. What about window.open, right? That's another one we've done as well. So these are all where we have the object comes first and something that the object can do or can perform. So these are what we call well, we've been calling them functions, but they're another word for them is methods. So those are in dot syntax we have object, property, thing, which is the same thing as saying thing, characteristic, but we also have object, method, right? Which is the same thing as saying thing, action, right? Or yeah, thing and function, right? But this is the technical language that we use, object method or object function, we could say. Where the actions or methods are followed by parentheses. or functions. Okay, so that's starting to explain a little bit like why we write the things, type the things that we type in the way that we type them. So that all started with when I typed in the console cities.length, right? Or because cities is the name of my array, and one of the abilities, one of the characteristics of an array is its length. All right, an array like I said, cities array has a length. Now, something to note is the length of my cities array, if we recall, is 5, right? That's the number of elements in the array. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The last number is always going to be 1 less than the length. If you don't know how many elements are in your array, let's say you have 10,261, right? Elements, but let's say you don't even know what that number is, but you want to get the last element in your array. If you want to know what that last element in your array is, you always can think about, well, the length of my array minus 1 is going to be the index of the last element of my array. So cities dot length, right, is the number of elements in the array, and 4 is the last element of my array, Phoenix. Remember that. We're about to explore that a little bit. So we know that cities gets all of the elements in my array. We see all 5 of them. But what if I only wanted to say get Houston? How would I just get Houston to pop up here? Well, I just put the index of Houston there. So if I just want Houston, I put 3 inside square brackets, like so. And then I just see Houston. If I want to see New York, I put 0. Right? And I get New York. If I want to get Phoenix, I put 4. And I get Phoenix. But that's only works if I know the numbers of my array, right? If I have 10,283 elements in my array or more, or some number that I just don't know, then I don't know what the different index numbers of my array elements are. So if I want to get to the last element in my array, but I don't know what the number of the last element of my array is, I don't know that it's 4. Well, one way of getting to 4, or the last element of my array, is doing cities dot length. Cities dot length is the number 5, right? If I put the number 5 inside the brackets there, so that is equal to the number 5. We've already seen that. Cities dot length is equal to the number 5. So this is the same thing as putting the number 5 there. The problem is there's no number 5, right? So if I try to put cities.5 here, it's going to say undefined. If I try to put cities.length, well, that's the same thing. That's equivalent to the number 5. If I do that, same thing, undefined. But remember, the last element is 4. Well, the way I get from 5 to 4 is to subtract 1. So cities.length is 5, minus 1 is 4. So we get Phoenix. This always will happen. Like, so if I add another city here, let's say Dallas, So if I add another city there, well, now the length of it is 6. I've added another element. So there's 6 elements now. So instead of Phoenix, cities.length minus 1 is going to provide Dallas. So this is always going to give you the last element in your array. No matter how many elements in your array, it's always going to provide the last element in your array. Okay. Any questions so far? No? So quiet. Okay. Let's do a little bit more exploration. I'm going to create another array in a different way. So like I said, there's more than one way to create an array, right? This is the more verbose way. We can do it in a shorter way, right? Also, with less typing. So we put var, let's call it, I don't know, let's call it continents, right? There's only so many continents. So var continents equals, now rather than typing new array, well, we can type new array, but rather than typing all of this, we type new array, but instead of typing all of cities, 1, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we could type this. Oops. This is actually the same thing, right, as doing this, only we type less. The thing about it is, so it's more efficient in a way, right? We don't have to type this over and over and over again in this repetitive way. So it's more efficient on the one hand. On the other hand, this explicitly tells us what the index numbers are, and we can see it right here in the code. Here, it's the same thing, but we don't say it. So we know that Europe is the first element in my array, like New York was. We know that North America is the second element in my array, like Los Angeles was, right? So if I console log this, and run it, we see the same thing here, right? They have index numbers. We just haven't explicitly told the browser what they are. It just assumes that this is the first element, second element, third element, so on, right? So this gets the index number of 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. There's another even shorter way of typing an array or creating an array. Staying with the geography thing, I guess today is a geography lesson, as well as a JavaScript lesson. We don't even have to type new array. We can just put it in square brackets, the same thing, like Atlantic, Arctic, Indian. Right? So we even type less here because we don't even use the words new array in it. Once again, though, because of the way we're typing it, all in between these square brackets, the computer is, I'm going to comment out this console log, put another one. The computer just knows that it's an array. All the same thing. It's just a shorter ways of doing the thing that we did up here. You can do it if you are going to need to create an array when you're making arrays, you can do it in any way you want, and they're all equally correct. There's no better way to do one. Experienced programmers, people who program a lot for work or whatever, tend to do it the shorter way. But that's not necessarily the best way. The best way is the way that you understand how to do, right? That's all that really matters. Because for the longest time when I was first learning how to program, this is the way I did it every single time. But even though it was longer and meant more typing, I could see everything right in front of me, right? It was much more explicit, and it helped, and I understood it better. So if that's the way your brain works, then use that way. If you like things short and sweet, then use this way. It's up to you how you do it. All right. Now, one last statement type that I want to talk about here. Do I want to do it in this one? Well, let's just save this. We're going to save this as it is, and we're going to create another file, another script file, so I can introduce another type of statement that we often use together with an array. Not always, not only, but it's one way we can think about how to use arrays too. They can work together. So I'll comment this last console log out so that it doesn't spit out the array anymore, and save this file and create a new file. But before we do create the new file, does anybody have any questions about arrays? So one thing I can imagine is, like I said before, one of the examples I gave you before is like maybe you have some sort of adventure game where you're collecting items, right, and putting them into your bag. We can create an array called, say, items or collection, or let's say you're going grocery shopping in your game and you're just picking up things off the shelf. We can put those things assemble those things in an array if you want. Okay, let's create a new script file. I'm gonna call it script02. No surprise there. .js. Okay, so here I'm going to introduce another type of statement that's super useful. So a looping statement is a statement type that repeats code a set number of times. One of those there are more than one type of loop. Probably the most commonly used loop is something known as, let me put this, something known as a for loop. A for loop loops by counting the number of times it loops. That's how a for loop works. It has to count how many times it loops. So you say, I'm going to have this loop 25 times, but in order for the loop to start and stop looping, right, it has to count. And then when it reaches the number 25, it stops counting. That's a simplified way of telling it, but let's explore that a little bit. The way a for loop works is we have to create a variable to count the number of loops. Number. And when we create that variable, we have to give it or assign it a start value where it will begin counting. Now, as I said, computers like to start counting at 0. So that's typically where we start. Typically, it starts counting at the number 0. Now, in addition to giving it a place where it needs to start counting, like I said, normally it likes to start counting at 0, but it doesn't have to start counting at 0. It could be start counting at 10. So 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, right? It could start anywhere. But we typically start at 0. It also, we have to tell where it's going to stop counting. Create a value that will be that will end the counting. Yeah. So let me see if I can, it's just that. Create a value that will stop it from counting, giving it an end value. And 3, tell the browser how to count. That seems kind of silly unless you think about it a little deeply. We all assume that we know how to count, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. But there are actually multiple ways of counting. We could count by ones like that, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, or we could count by twos, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, count by fives, we count by sevens, we count by 200s, whatever, right? So there's any number of ways for the computer to count. It can even count backwards, right? 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So we have to specify how to count. And all of those might be useful in a loop at some point, but commonly it's by ones and starting at a low value and going to a high value. So that's just typical, right? But it's not necessarily that way. Okay, so it's called a for loop. And this is what a for loop looks like. So format-wise, syntax-wise, it looks exactly like an if statement, right? An if statement, we would put if there, and it looks just like the same thing, right? But we're putting a for there. So syntactically, it's exactly the same. as an if statement. In an if statement, we would put the condition between the parentheses. In a for loop is where we do all this. Between the parentheses, we put the start value, the end value, like where it starts counting, where it ends counting, and how it counts. All right, so we create a variable first that's going to do the counting. So var, and typically we use the variable I, which stands for integer, but you don't it doesn't have to be. Var I equals 0, let's say. I'm gonna put spaces there, it's easier to read. So that's the variable that's going to do the counting, and we've assigned it a start value, which is 0. Next, we have to limit it at until what point will it stop counting. So I will continue counting so long as it's less than 10. So it's going to continue counting upward so long as it's less than 10. Once it is no longer less than 10, it will stop counting. The third is how to count. So we're going to have it count by ones from a low value to a high value. So I plus plus, that plus plus is increment, means it increments upward by 1. So every time it goes through the loop, it starts out at 0, and then the next time through the loop, it's I has a value of 1. The next time through the loop, I has a value of 2, and then 3, and then 4, and so on. It keeps doing counting upward until it reaches 10. And then at 10, it stops. So it's going to count. Well, let's see. If I want to print out how it's counting into the console, I just console log I, right? I is a thing that's counting, starts at 0, right? It goes up to 10, counts by ones. So we should see that here in the console. Now we have to link this file to the index. Put script02 there, right? In my index, script02 in my index. And then I run, save everything. ¿Qué pasó? What happened? Did I not save this? Maybe I didn't save the index. I thought I did. Save that. There we go. We see the console there, 0. Oh, why is Siri talking to me? 0 through 9. Did everybody get that? Something like that. Let's see what it looks like in Google Chrome. Oh, I can just do it here. Right, same thing, right? 0 through 9. So, why did it stop counting at 9 and not go to 10? Somebody tell me.
Because it starts at 0 and then it goes up to 10, but it goes to 9. It goes like to the one less than 10 because it's not a greater than, it's not a less than or equal to.
Exactly, right? So it's counting and it continues counting upwards so long as I is less than 10. The moment that I is no longer less than 10, it doesn't include 10, it's less than 10. If we want to include 10, we would put, like you said, less than or equal to 10, right? So then we get 10, right? If we want, well, that's, yeah. Now, if we left it at 9 or less than or equal to 10, right? it's still going to loop 10 times, right? Because 0 through 9 is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That's 10 times. It just starts counting at 0 and goes up to 9. So that's 10 loops still. Okay. What do so I just want to leave it at that, I guess. I want to show something else with regard to loops. Not yet. So we're going to be using both loops and arrays as we continue. So I've introduced arrays in my first script, and just the very beginning of loops in my second script. Well, let's just do one last thing here. I don't want to just see I. What if I want to repeat? Like I said, the loop is about repeating code, right? So let's say for some stupid reason, I wanted to say hello 10 times. Well, then I would put console.log hello. And since I'm putting it in a loop that loops 10 times, we're going to see 10 hellos. So that's what I mean by it actually doesn't print out in the console 10 times, but we see the number 10 here in the console that tells us that that has happened 10 times. Let's see what it said, what it does in Chrome. Same thing, right? We have the number 10 next to the hello. That just tells us that it's happened 10 times. So that's a dumb example, but sometimes we do have to repeat the same thing over and over and over again. And so we would want to put it in a loop. It's much better than typing this 10 times, right? If we had to do that 10 times, right, we have super repetitive code. This reduces it down to just a single line instead of 10 lines of code. So that is so loops will make things more efficient when things have to be repeated. You know, all of these initial concepts that I'm talking to you about, like, so last week I talked about variables, I talked about conditionals, right? If this, then that, right? If you click on this button, then make something happen. If you click on again, then make something else happen, right? On and off button that I showed you. So I showed you variables, I showed you if-else statements. Today I'm showing you arrays and now loops. These are all like super fundamental, really important statement types that we use all the time when programming. So this is just the beginning of these things. Let's comment that out so that doesn't just happen over and over again. And let me go to the next file here. All right. Just give me a second. I'm trying to think about what I'm going to do here. Okay, so I need you to get 5 images. Okay, 5 images. I want you to put those 5 images in your images folder. And then I want you to name them something like if you're going to get, like I get images of cats, I would call it cat 1, cat 2, cat 3, cat 4, and so on, like that, right? Make sure you don't use spaces, right? Don't use spaces, but number the image, or put a number in the image name. I already have some images that I will want to use. I'm going to put those. Here, okay. So you see I've named mine Reef 1, Reef 2, Reef 3, Reef 4, Reef 5. We should do something similar. So just a bit of content. Um, so that we can continue. Okay, so let's style this a little bit. Not very much, just a little bit. That means I need CSS link up here if I want to style this. So I'll go ahead and put that, even though I haven't created my CSS file, I'm going to go ahead and put my link to it here. So I've created the link to my style sheet, but I haven't created a style sheet yet. So the next thing I need to do is go to my CSS folder and create my style sheet, right? I'm going to call it styles01 CSS and start typing my styles. Good. Oops. Oh, it should be H1, sorry, not H2. Let's make this a little bit darker. No, I haven't put an image yet, but I'm going to put an image inside the image ID. So we have the div image here, right? So that's not going to affect anything because I don't have an image here yet, right? I'll eventually put one in there. All right, so bit of styling, right? Hopefully, does that work for everyone? Okay, so nothing serious, just a little bit there. Now we're going to create a new script. So this will be script 03. Oops. .js, and it goes in our JS folder, script 03. So we're going to create multiple arrays here. And the data is going to correspond to each other. So you'll see what I mean by that. So, and I mentioned it once when I was first introducing. So let's say I want to create a series, a couple of arrays for, let's say, the students in this class, first names and last names, right? So let's call it first for first names. So we have first 0 equals, and I'm just going to do this in alphabetical order on from my roster. Okay. So that's the array of first names. What about last names? And so we call them parallel because the first element corresponds to the first element, the second element here corresponds to the second element, the third element here, and so on, right? So the data in each array corresponds to the data in the other array by index number, right? So the index numbers correspond to each other. So they're lined up in the same way. That's why we call them parallel arrays. So like before, I could do a console log for first, and then a console log for last, right? Now we have to put the script tags in the index. This is not going to work yet because we don't have the script tags in the index. I'll leave it here so you can catch up on your typing. So if I want the console logs to show up, I need to go to my index here and add another script tag pair for my third script, right? And then both the console logs should appear for the first array and the second array, right? For first and last names. Okay. Are y'all with me? Everything's good?
Yep.
Yeah.
So what I'd like to do is when I load the page, I would like, instead of appearing in the console, right? Let's comment that out. We know they're working now. Everything is appearing in the console. But what I would like to do is replace the heading with the first and last name. Right? So as soon as the page loads, I want to replace the heading with the first and last name. Well, if I want that to happen automatically when the page loads, excuse me, that means I need a function, but the function, remember, has to wait until the whole page loads to run. So the way we do that is, if you recall, window dot onload equals function. And just to remind you, I'll put comments here. Hold on a second. This function activates only after the entire page of HTML loads, right? The window on load means once the window is fully loaded, then it runs the function. So I want to put first and last name into the heading, right? The first heading, H1, right? So if I go to an index, it's this guy right here, right? The H1 heading. So that has the ID of heading. So that's useful. If I want to put stuff, I need to know the ID. So I can get element by ID, right? So document dot get element by ID, and it's going to be heading because that's the name I gave it. Dot inner HTML, right? We've seen this before. I'm going to start by just putting the first name, right? So equals first. Now I have to choose which name I want. Let's say, well, who wants to go first? Who wants to see their name here first for everybody to see? All right, come on. I'm going to put, let's say I'll put, how about Cindy? So Cindy has 1 as the index, so I put first 1. Okay. Let's see if that works. Oh, I get an error. Oh, I spelled get element by ID wrong. There we go. Cindy pops up. Yay, we got Cindy. Okay, but what if I want first and last name? Well, simple. It's first plus last, right? Not so simple as that, but let's take a look and see what happens. Right, it runs the name together. We need to put a space in between, right? So that means between the first and the last name, we need to put a space here. That's simple. We just put a space between quotes. That's it. It's concatenation, right? Did I say that? There we go. And that adds the space. Okay, let's do something even more interesting. What if I want a random name to appear? A random name from my array. So it could be randomly, any of these names instead of like me choosing the, Cindy Khan, right? It could be anything. Well, that means we need a random number. We need to figure out how to get a random number. Now, a random number between 0 and 6 or from 0 to 6. Okay, so unfortunately in JavaScript, it's a little bit more complicated than we would want, but it's not too hard. Once you do it once, it's just something you got to memorize. The first thing, if I need a random number, I need a place to put that number. So I need a variable for my random number. So I'm going to call it num. Right, that's going to be the name of the variable that holds my random number. And interestingly, luckily, there is a function or a method that generates a random number. So it belongs in what we call the math object. So we put math is something that's built into JavaScript. Math has a whole bunch of functionality, and one of the things that math can do is generate a random number. So it's math.random. but not so fast. Random, math.random, generates a number that's random, yes, but it's a random number between 0 and 1. And you're like, what the hell does that mean? What is a random number between 0 and 1? It's a decimal number. And so it has decimal points. So there's an infinite number of numbers between 0 and 1, right? Because we could, however many decimals we could go, right? Well, JavaScript can't calculate infinity because we would be here literally forever. No programming language can calculate infinity because they're here forever, right? And we'd be waiting forever and ever and ever. There's no way. So it has a limited number of numbers that it generates a random number from, right? Now, if I put that number console.log num, right? That's going to have the random number in it, right? Let's see what it does. Okay. So we get a number with my number. Yours is going to be different from mine, but mine is 0.8013921934538828. So a lot of numbers, right? That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 numbers, right? Decimal. That's a lot of numbers, a lot of randomness. It's not completely random because we would have an infinite number of numbers here, but it's a pretty damn random number. But that's not useful to us, right? We want a number between from 0 to 6, right? Here we've got this random number decimal. Well, we can multiply math.random times the number that we have here, right? Well, we have how many things here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right? So we multiply that by 7. Let's see what we get. Well, I get 3 point something, 4 point something, 2 point something, 6.5, 6, 0, right? 0, 2, 5, 2. So some random number, it's limited, but I still have that decimal there, right? Okay, so I really need to round it down, right? To get rid of that decimal so that it rounds to the nearest whole number below, right? How do I do that? Well, this is generating a random number. Right? That's between 0 and 7, from 0 to 7. And I need to round that down. How do I do that? Well, that needs to be placed, what this number is, this math.random times 7 needs to be rounded down. So we put all of that math inside of another function called math.floor. All of that. So this is generating the random number with lots of decimal points. Math.floor. If we put that number inside of a function math.floor, we get a random number 0 to 6. So I got 0. Yep. It's going to be from 0 to 6. Math.floor rounds down to the nearest integer. Well, 7 is how many elements that I have in my array. But what if I add elements to my array? What if people joined our class, right? That means the number of elements changes in my array. Is there there's something better that I just talked about in the previous exercises, that gets the number of elements in my array automatically. I don't have to remember that number. And in fact, since my array I can have more than 6, I can add 2, 3, 5, or subtract from it. I'm not necessarily sure how many elements are in my array at any given time. So instead of putting 7 there, I'm going to put the name of the array, the first one. Since they're parallel, it's the same. They have the same number. I'll put first dot length instead of 7. That is the number of elements in the array, first dot length, which is 7, but in case the length of the array changes, this is better. I still get the same results, right? Same thing. Okay, so that's generating a random number in num and a random number from 0 to 6. Well, if I want a random name here, instead of always Cindy's name, her index number is 1. Well, that just means I've randomized this number. So I can, instead of putting 1 here, I can just put num here and here, right? So I'm never going to know which name appears. Oh, I didn't save it. There we go.
Professor,
Yeah.
did you put anything? Did you change anything in the index though?
Yeah, I did. I added this stuff.
Oh wait, let me just. But for like like script 03, you didn't change anything from the index, right?
Yeah, right here, look.
Yeah, I have that.
Okay, so I have 3 new IDs, right? And so the reason the name is going here is because of the heading ID, right? And so I'm putting it document.getElementById ID heading. Are you getting any errors in your console?
No. Yeah, I just changed the index to from H to heading. Yeah, now I get it. Yeah, I got it.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Awesome. Anybody else? Y'all are good? Okay. Yeah. All right. So let's do one other thing here. We've got those images, right, that you put in your folder, hopefully. So I have 5 images that I put in my folder. I named them reef01.jpg to reef05.jpg. And what I want to do is, and in the index, I have this div here called image. So I want to place a random image here too. Okay. So I'm going to create another array here. I'll just call it images. And here, I'm just going to put the the name of the image. So my first one is reef01.jpg. Oops. And then 2. I just wanted to make things simple. Since I have 7 names, I think I should have 7 images too. It just will make things much simpler. So how about we get just a couple more images so that we have the same number of images as we have names. All right, let's do that. I'm gonna get a couple more images here. Since I'm using reefs, I might as well just stick with it. Which one shall I use? I hope I haven't used these already. That's kind of cool looking. I don't, they look so fake. We use that one. That looks really fake. I don't know if it's real, but I'm gonna save it. All right. Well, that's the 6th one. That's cool looking. Might as well do that one too. This looks like from another planet. And pink broccoli. Oops, did not mean to do that. I made a mistake. It's here. Oops. Have to get rid of that E in there. So now I have 7 images. Okay, so we have our images in an array. It has the same number of elements as our other arrays. So I can use the same sort of random number to insert a random image into the page, which is pretty simple here. I just have to do another document.getElement by ID. Now this time I'm going to invoke in my index the image ID, right? So image. And I need to place an entire img tag, right? So img src equals, and then I open the quotes. All of my images are in the images folder. So I put images there with a slash. So we're not quite done yet, but I want to go ahead and stop there for a second and run it and see what happens. Oh, it's not images, images, my bad. Is it images? Image, oh, it's image. Oh, it is right, document ID. Oh, I see what I didn't do. Well, that's fine. Image is not defined. Why not? It knows heading. Why doesn't it know image? Huh. Everybody getting the same error? I mean, it should be printing something into the page. That little piece of code, it should be printing into the page. That's correct. What we're not supposed to be getting is this error. It doesn't know what image is. That's weird. It's right here. Image. Okay, maybe it doesn't like the word image. Let's put images. Let's not do images. Let's call imgs. imgs. Let me try that. So imgs. It doesn't like that image. Oh, I think. Oh, I see what. Look what I did. I have S here and no S's here. That's the problem. Stupid me. I just need to add an S here. I'm going to put this back to image. And back to image here. All right. Let's see. All right, so nothing happened. That's weird. It should be there, but let's look and see what the expect. Well, that's because I'm not finished, but I thought it would print something out anyway. All right, so I didn't finish typing this. I have the location of the images folder, and what follows is the array, right? Images array with the random number. Just like the first array with the random number here, if I want to put an image, I need images with a random number. Well, this is not going to work, but I'm going to go ahead and show you. So we can't like within quotes, we can't type the array name. Like I can't put the name of my array and then num, because it's between quotes, and we'll see it's green. Right here, we didn't put the array name between quotes, and here we didn't put the array name between quotes. Here, the image array is between quotes, so it can't be there. So I have to put it outside of the quotes. So I concatenate it. All right. So I have the first part of the tag here. And then I have to put the ending part of the tag here at the end. So plus with the closing single quote, the slash, and the angle bracket. So this is the opening, the first part of the IMG tag. This is the ending piece of the IMG tag with the image in the array in between. And there we go. We're going to get a random image along with a random name. Okie dokie. Does that work? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm ending class early today. I think we've done a lot. I think this is a lot to do for one class. There's one other thing that I'll do on Thursday with regard to arrays and randomness and loops. So we'll do that on Thursday, and then we'll just do other stuff as well. So that's quite a bit. We learned a lot. We learned about arrays, which we can have like just text arrays, but we can also have arrays for images as well. We can also, and we'll see this on Thursday, we can make arrays of pages so that, for example, we could go to a random page if we clicked on a link. So that is a possibility as well. And we learned about random numbers and dot syntax. So today was a big day, I think, a heavy day, even though we are ending early. So Thursday, more on this. Your evaluations and grades for your projects will be up later today. If you have any questions about that, please make sure you let me know. Okay. If you don't understand what I'm saying, or if you disagree with the way I evaluated, that's fine too. We'll just have a chat about it, because I can make mistakes too. I might overlook something. But in any case, I like to give you lots of feedback so that you know how to improve as best as possible on your projects. The ideas, not just the way it looks, not just the way it functions, but the ideas as well, right? Okay, so yeah, y'all have a good week. I'll see you on Thursday. Okay. Yeah, if you have to stay, just hang out and I'll talk to you. All right. Bye.
Have a good one.
You too.
I just have a you think I can like maybe share my page?
Yeah, sure, of course. Let me make you co-host. All right, ready to go.
Okay, sure. I just have in my page it says like the last name is undefined.
Okay, let's take a look.
So I don't know what's wrong with this one.
All right. That looks good. So let's take a look at your script. All right, so document.get element by ID, image, inner HTML, images, non plus. Yeah, that looks good. So I don't see your error though. Can you run the page?
Let's say
Where's your error? It doesn't say, oh, for that, undefined, con undefined. Okay, I see. So let's go back to your your script, please. So it's the last name is working. It's the first that's not, right? So first 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
wait, I think it's wait, yeah, it's the first name. I think.
Yeah. But for some reason,
Probably like a typo again, I guess.
oh, look in line 16.
Yeah.
You see where it says first there? That's
Yeah.
last. That should be last.
Also, I changed everything here. Oh,
Yeah,
all right.
because it's the second array and all of those. Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah, all right.
Good.
So if I just want to like make the image like smaller, I mean just like
Yeah.
in general.
So let's go back to your HTML first. Probably a CSS problem. All right, that's fine. So go to your CSS. Image img. Oh, it's not img in 28. It's image, the first one. Because the ID is image with an age. Right. So
Okay.
if you look at your, that's otherwise you're good. And it should be 60. Yeah, no, I'm sorry, 100%. You're right. 100% of
Because
the wrapper. Yeah. So now,
all right, okay. All right. I think I
okay,
got it.
good.
Okay, Professor. You have a good day.
You too. I'll see you on Thursday.
Hi, Carter. I
Hey
just
there.
tapped into the chat box. I just want to ask if you could check the email and Discord because
Yes,
I sent
I
the
know I
emails,
got your,
but
I'm sorry I didn't respond. Somehow I missed your
it's
emails.
okay.
I actually went away myself. So yeah, but you're good. So you're not being, everything's fine. I don't think you should worry about the missed classes. Okay.
Okay, can I just like make up my assignment for the 6th?
Yes. So did you already do them?
No, because you close it and I cannot see any instructions.
Okay. So give me a second and I'll reopen it for you.
Thank you. Could it be in like before the Tuesday of Thursday?
I'll
Because
just
it's
give you,
already 9 for me.
I'll give you until next Tuesday, a week.
Oh, thank you.
It's okay.
I have already done the project 1, so only the assignment 6, I guess. I don't remember. Oh, it should be.
Let me just check to see what.
Yeah, 6.
Only 6?
6 homework.
What about 7?
7, I have submit.
You have, okay.
Yeah.
So I'm a little bit behind on grading because I went away. So let me, if it's only 6, then
Yeah.
that's easy. So today is the 20th. I'll give you until the 27th at 9:30, okay, a.m. Okay?
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay.
That's it?
Yeah.
All right. So have a good one.
You too. Bye.
Bye. Hey,
Ah, hi. Can you hear me?
yeah.
Oh, okay. I just want to know if you read my email or not.
Which email? I
About
missed a few emails because I went away and I apologize for that. So what was it about? Can you remind me?
it's about project one.
And what about it?
Project one. Oh, sorry, project
But
one.
what were you asking? Just if you remember.
Uh,
I'll tell you if I remember if I read it or not. I'm sorry. I got behind.
oh, apologies for my mistake.
Let me check.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Okay, so how about we just make it so that you can submit right now? Do you want to do that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Actually, I attach my files.
Yeah, but I mean, why don't we make it so that you can submit it in Brightspace right now?
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. Okay.
That's better because then all of them are in the same place. All right, so see if you can submit now or wait. Yeah, I think you should be able to.
Yep. I can submit.
Right. So go. All right. So you have until at 1 o'clock. So if you
Yeah,
need to. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome. Sorry about that. See you on Thursday.
Okay. See you Thursday.